Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It seems that it was not too long ago that we were actually sitting with this wonderful brother, our brother Siavash. Let alone it was as it was yesterday that we buried him and we had his memorial service here. When I say that, it really does seem like it was yesterday. For me personally, on the drive here, that drive seemed eerily similar and very familiar with the feelings and the emotions that came back from a year ago. Time moved really fast. Time moved really, really fast. And it would be truly a shame if there's no lessons to be learned, to take with us, and to understand and to apply. I don't think our brother Siavash would be very happy if he didn't know that we can take something from his passing. Inshallah, he's in a better place. A year later, not one time, not one instant, when Sia comes up in conversation, when there's a remembrance of him somewhere, somehow, that anyone, at least in my presence, or at least from the experiences that I've had, that anyone has said anything negative about him. That someone remembered him in a way that was hurtful to them in any way, or they remembered something that, he did something to me, or he said something to me. There's a few lessons that I would want to highlight here. I don't want to take too much of everyone's time. Is that how do we want to be remembered? Because certainly, inshallah, you all have long lives, but maybe one day our picture will be here. And someone up here will be standing and saying a few words or something along those lines. If we are lucky enough to be remembered. If we are lucky enough to be remembered. What do we want to be said about us? What qualities do we want to be remembered for? And what impact did we have on others that they would remember us in that way, hopefully in a positive way? And our interactions with each other and others outside of this gathering, what impact does that have on them? What is the lasting image that we leave behind? As I mentioned, that nobody has a negative thing to say about Sia. Nobody that I know of. What will others remember us for? The one thing that this society has constructed, and the false narrative that has been fostered for millennia, that death is theoretical. And if it is a reality, very few who embrace that reality. And when I say embrace, I'm talking about apply it to themselves, truly, that I'm not going to live for a very long time. And when I say, inshallah, like I said, long lives to everybody. But a person can live 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, but it's a snapshot in time and how long this existence has been here for. It's a snapshot in time. And then we move on to the next stage, the next ground in this journey of ours. And the false construct is that when someone leaves this place, that their existence is over and done with. We Muslims, we don't believe in that. We Muslims, we believe that this existence in this realm, in this world, is something that has to happen as part of the journey. It's not the whole journey. But the false construct, as I mentioned, is that some perceive, or this world has built itself to be, or the society has built it to be, that this is it. There's nothing beyond this. And if there is, it's theoretical. That itself is a mirage. That itself, like I said, is a false construct. Everyone will leave this place at some point in time. Has to. It's the sunnah of this world. The sunnah of this world that it does not let anyone last beyond a certain time period. But as I said, what do we leave behind? And what do we take with us? They're two different things. What we leave behind may be different or similar to what we take with us. As the Prophet said, there's only three that stay behind. A sadaqah jariyah, a dua from a pious child, and there's a few other deeds that are also mentioned. But one thing that we cannot forget about is how we treat others. Because if something is done against someone else, as I mentioned, no one remembers Sia as someone who is negative, as someone who mistreated others, as someone who harmed others, as someone who hurt others' feelings. That itself, that act or that conduct, may require the forgiveness of that person that we hurt or has made feel bad. And that forgiveness is required. It would be best to do it before we leave this world. And that is the one thing that we have, one of the things that we have to remember is if we have hurt someone in any way, ask their forgiveness, because you never know when it's time to pack up and go. Never know. Nothing is guaranteed in this life. As someone way before told me, only two things are guaranteed in this life: death and taxes. There's nothing else beyond that. Nothing else beyond that. Death is a part of this world, and no one is invincible. We've all been to burials, and some of you have heard me say this before. When we go to the burial, and the body is not there yet, and the grave is dug, and the person stands above that grave, one of the first thoughts that commonly occurs to the person is that one day this may be me. One day this may be me. But a believer, a mu'min, looks at that grave and he says, this is home. This is home. I'm living in a rental right now, but this is home. This is where they're going to bring me. And regardless of how large the rental is, how many square feet, how expensive it is, everyone ends up in the same home. Everybody. Regardless of how pious they are, regardless of how rich they are, regardless of how poor they are. Everyone ends up in the same home. The question is, what does a person take with them? I'm not standing up here trying to be negative, but in gatherings like this, when we remember our dear loved ones, it is a true disservice to them if we do not take lessons from their passing. It's a disservice to them because they are in a realm, if they could talk to us, they would probably tell us to increase some of the things that we should be doing and stay away from some of the things that make us heedless and have ghafla to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the Quran says, some will say, I wish I can go back and tell my people. I wish. Someday, each one of us will wish. Because there's always something to get more. You know how successful institutions have a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, 15, 20, 30, some of them have 50 and 100. A successful believer has the same plan. They don't look just for this evening, or tomorrow, or this week, or what's my next meal, or this month, or 6 months from now. They look for a year, and they look for 5 years, and then 10 years, and then 15 and 20 and on and on and on and on. But they don't lose sight that I may not make it to then. So they have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. They plan for both. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, live this life as if you're going to live forever. But live for the hereafter as if you're going to die tomorrow. Both coexist. They both coexist. But successful believers live for both. And most importantly, they are not deceived by this realm. Many are deceived. And part of that deception is that a person could be immune to death. That the angel Azrael will skip them at one point in time. Doesn't happen. No one is immune. The best creation that ever walked this earth had to pass on to the next realm. Had to. Everyone does. The Prophet had a saying. Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, the common remembrance of death revives the heart and nourishes it to greater strengths. It revives the heart. SubhanAllah. Remembering the end of this life revives the heart. It doesn't jive. He's talking about the spiritual heart, the true heart of the human being, not this physical thing that beats in our chest. That is the heart that will continue this journey and later on can manifest itself. And that is one of the things that we have to remember, is that we're not immortal. Yes, we could be young and we have health and we have wealth and we can get up and have our own power and move on. But time moves fast, as I mentioned in the beginning of the talk, just a year ago. A year ago was yesterday. I still remember where I was and the time of day that I was that my phone went off about Sia. I remember that day. And that day seemed like it was yesterday. It was like yesterday. Many of you are nodding in agreement. Time is moving very, very fast. Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali alayhi salam says, he says, I am at awe of the son of Adam, whose breaths is the countdown for their lifespan. Yet he is completely heedless of his own mortality. Completely heedless. In complete ghafla of his own mortality. But every breath that he takes is a step towards his grave. Now again, he's the same Amir that said, live this life to the fullest, basically, in a halal way, of course. But plan for tomorrow and the hereafter as if you're going to leave this place tomorrow. As I mentioned, it would be a huge disservice to Siyah if we do not take lessons. And one of the many that we can take, first and foremost, our wajibat. Are we fulfilling our wajibat? Because that's one of the things that we will be taking with us to that eternal home. And it is the same wajibat that will stare us in the face, in our face. In addition to the spiritual side of the human being, what have I done to enrich that side? And is that my identity, or did I live my identity based on my physical self? The spiritual identity is much more rooted and more eternal than the physical self. The physical self is just a vessel that walks from one place to the other, and it ages over time, and eventually it expires, and it's done with. But that spiritual identity that is directly linked to the soul, what have we made of it? Did I enrich it? Did I nourish it? And the nourishment of the soul comes not from physical nourishment. Physical nourishment is supposed to be the vessel or the ride that's supposed to give nourishment to the soul. That soul is nourished by getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Document, as the brother just recited, وَأَشْتَاقَ إِلَيْكَ بِالْمُشْتَاقِ, that I would miss you to the degree where I feel like I'm homesick to you, that I feel like I long for you. That's what a believer's mind is, that they're homesick. They would be absolutely homesick. They miss Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They want to be closer to Him in every moment, regardless of the situation. How often do we feel that homesickness is the question. And if we do not, the question is why? Have we become so attached to this world that we forgot about home? As I mentioned, we live in a rental. Did we get so comfortable in this rental that we forgot about home? Because everyone's going to go home at some point in time, but what shape am I going to be in, and what am I bringing home? What baggage am I bringing? And is it something that is going to be pleasant, or is it something that's going to stare me in the face and tell me you didn't do well by X, Y, and Z? You didn't fulfill responsibilities A, B, and C. Because that's accountability. In our religion, we believe in accountability. And if we don't know what accountability is, open up Risat al-Huquq for Imam Zayn al-Abidin. And he lists 50, at least, rights. And he starts with the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he has the rights of the awliya of Allah, and the rights of the organs, and the rights of the relatives. He starts with the top, and he goes down, and he expands the circle, and the circle, and the circle. There's nothing more complete than this religion outlining what accountability is to the human being. As members of this religion and citizens of this religion, at the very least, let's recognize and learn about these rights. And then hold ourselves accountable. Am I observing those rights? And if we're not, it's okay. That's part of the plan. How can I observe these rights? That's part of the plan. It's okay. No one is done for. Allah's mercy is far and wide. What are these rights and how can I observe these rights? So when it's time to go, if I have debts, I've paid my debts. And if I'm going with a surplus, by all means. And at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. I always repeat this sentence of mine that I have. It's a personal choice. But it is also an obligation for those who recognize the importance of the obligation, and for everyone who should be recognizing the importance of this obligation. What am I doing for my spiritual self? Where am I spiritually? And the rights that I'm supposed to observe, am I observing them? At the end of the day, it's a personal choice, but it is an obligation. The taxes. People sometimes don't pay taxes. It's called tax evasion. But it is an obligation. Same thing here. Islam outlines the obligations of a person. Unfortunately, the current society that we live in has lifted those obligations, and the first priority for a person is me, 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 me. I come first. Let the whole world burn down, but I come first. It's true. Islam doesn't look at it that way. Islam cares about the individual, but Islam also nurtures the individual to be a complete human being if they choose to. And at the end of the day, as I mentioned, it's a personal choice. How high do we want to get? Do we want to hit that ceiling and push ourselves? Because God knows that we push ourselves in so many different directions when it comes to the materialistic plans that we have in this life. We want to go to college, and we want to have a career, and we want to make money, and we want to have a salary, and we want to get married, and we want to have children, and eventually there's retirement. You see how whole life just got planned in 5 seconds? And then retirement, that's when they say you relax and then eventually you die. Right? Is there anything beyond that? But let's make it meaningful. Let's make our existence in this realm meaningful. Not just for ourselves and those around us, but when we go on to the next realm. It's part of this journey, brothers and sisters. What are our wajibat, and are we fulfilling them? Our conduct with others, how are we fulfilling that? And are we fulfilling the rights of that conduct? And how am I nourishing my spiritual self? And where am I getting this nourishment from? Because there's false narrative of spirituality now in every direction. Every direction where they tell you that you could do this and be spiritual, you could do that and be spiritual, and everyone is chasing things in a million different directions. When we have gems, for example, like Dua Kumail, and this gathering that we have every Thursday night, there's a lot of, if some of you don't know, there's a gathering here every Thursday night, reciting Dua Kumail. This gem that we have. The Ma'soom says, if you do not have the time to recite it once a week, recite it once a month. And if you do not have time to recite it once a month, recite it once a year. And if you do not have time to recite it once a year, at least recite it once in your lifetime. Get something from it. Get that nourishment from it. Every line has so many different layers from this dua. Every line. But it takes a person to sit and listen and focus. Inshallah, we are one of the ones who are rewarded for our deeds, and inshallah we have the tawfiq to improve and get better. Inshallah we are one of the ones that truly reflect on our lives and our journeys in this life as well as the next stage that we have coming over. Inshallah, we continue to remember our brother often. And one of the greatest things they could do for him is do something on his behalf. Pay sadaqah. Read Surah Al-Fatiha for him. Pray 2 rak'ahs on his behalf. Visit his grave. Read Quran for his soul. Remember when I said about nourishment? All of these things are nourishment for the dear ones who have passed on. I'm sorry that I took so much of your time. Please recite the salawat and please recite the Fatiha for the soul.